Ladies and gentlemen, once we realized how irresponsible consumption can affect the environment, we are ready to start working towards change. And so our next session will be about the path to green thinking or green mindset. The simplest and at the same time the most difficult step in the transition to a green economy is to make a change from a consumer mindset to one of preservation and building a responsible culture. Our next session will talk about developing responsible consumption and green thinking on an individual level.
Our next speaker received his first Environmental Achievement Award from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau while still in high school. His main impact thus far is Lidbot, which helps businesses and cities automate waste collection and ensure transparency in waste production and recycling. Please welcome the founder of Lidbot, Hamoun Karami.
So imagine you're out for dinner one night, and as you ordered your meal, you wait 20 minutes for it to arrive. Sitting there hungry, it finally arrives at your table. Before the server puts the plate down on your table, he removes 91% of your meal and throws it in the trash. That is exactly what's happening with our recycled plastic. Today, 91% of recyclable plastic is thrown into landfill. It's buried, it's incinerated. And this is a statistic that I could barely believe. My name is Hamoun Karami, and I'm the CEO and founder of Lidbot. And today, I'll be sharing with you how confusion has led to a plastic recycling crisis. We'll first touch on the journey my team and I have been on the last few years. Second, I will share even more alarming discoveries that we've made while working in the waste and recycling supply chain. Then, we will talk about confusion, the confusion in consumers and how it has led to catastrophic effects in the waste and recycling supply chain. And lastly, I will share a controversial solution, one that if implemented correctly could have immense positive impacts on our waste and recycling supply chain and create a true, healthy circular economy once and for all. It all started in 2018 in Taipei, Taiwan, when I was on stage with a steel trash bin that I had borrowed from the city government. I stood there for 6 minutes sharing with the panel what I thought was a great idea, that we needed to track, measure, and better manage our waste and recycling using smart sensor technology. After receiving second place prize, we knew we were onto something. Fast forward to October 2018, and I contracted some local engineers in Taipei. We built this little black box that would stick to the top of every waste and recycling bin and turn it into a smart bin. So I gathered 8 of the smartest people I could find from 4 countries around the world, and we all share one vision: to help our customers lower their costs of waste and recycling collection, increase cleanliness in their public spaces, and help them better understand their site-specific waste and recycling production. Today, our product has matured and has been shipped to 8 countries around the world, and we've been lucky enough to work with some of the biggest names in waste and recycling. We've also built an enterprise-grade analytics system to help visualize the data that we're collecting and create actionable plans for these companies. Here is a picture of one of our sensors being installed at Sentosa Island in Singapore. So now that you understand a little bit about my team and I's journey, I'd like to get back into our recycling crisis. One of the questions that we got asked all the time from customers all around the world was if our sensor could detect the contents of the bin. We got asked this question time and time again. But what we realized was they were actually talking about recycling contamination. Recycling contamination is when non-recyclable items or garbage end up in our recycling streams. This also contaminates the good recycling in our recycling bins and trucks and causes a majority of this recycling to actually be sent to landfills, buried or incinerated. I could not believe what I was hearing. And for me, this is a critical problem in our waste and recycling supply chain. Higher contamination rates meant higher sorting costs for material recovery facilities, or MRFs, whose job was solely to separate our recycling. What they saw was they were getting more and more garbage coming in through their doors, so that ultimately meant their costs skyrocketed. Those skyrocketed costs translated down the supply chain into recycled plastic being deemed expensive. Because this recycling plastic was deemed expensive, it ultimately prevented manufacturers from creating products made from recycled materials. Then, more of Earth's finite resources are being depleted every single day. Not a circular economy, a vicious circular system. To really understand where the problem was coming from, it's important that we take a quick detour to understand how we got here today. In 1970, Gary Anderson, who was 27 at the time, designed the universal recycling symbol. He made it for Container Corporation of America, who was looking for a symbol that can be used around the globe to help consumers and operators better identify recyclable products. Shortly after, 4 more symbols were added so that consumers and operators could help identify generic materials, black recycling, recycled paper, and partially recycled paper as well. Fast forward to 1988, and 7 more symbols were added: the resin identification code, a plastic identification code that would help us identify the plastic material used in our products. To make things even more complicated, depending on where you live locally, some of these plastics may or may not be accepted into the recycling stream. This was causing even further contamination. Take a look at New York's, Toronto's, and Berlin's acceptable plastic codes. Globally, 25% of the things we throw into the recycling bin are actually garbage. Consumers have been held responsible for being properly educated on the products they purchase and where they end up. Millions of dollars have been spent globally on education programs with taglines like, "When in doubt, throw it out." This has ultimately resulted in 91% of all our recyclables going into landfill, and that is a global number. This all boils down to 2 fundamental truths. The first one being, none of us really know what we're doing when it comes to recycling. The second, if we fix recycling contamination, we could ultimately fix the recycling crises. So what is the solution? How do we solve this horrific problem? Well, we think we need to revisit and create new systems for labeling our recyclable and non-recyclable products. Take a look at this water bottle. How long did it take for you to realize that this was recyclable? This is what recycling needs to be, simple and black and white. Let's take a little detour. In 1969, Congress passed the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act. Now you might be thinking, what does this have to do with what we're talking about? Well, this act required all tobacco companies to populate 30% of their labels to a Surgeon General's warning. This is a prime example of when lawmakers and policy stepped in to create new standards for how we educate our customers on the products that they are buying. 372 million bags of Lay's are sold in the US every single year. 372 million bags of chips land in our landfills and our oceans. How can we change the labels of these products to educate consumers on the negative effects they're having on the lungs of our planet? How can we set new laws and policies to educate consumers about the products they purchase every single day? How can we educate them that their purchase is having a negative effect on the lungs of our planet? 372 million bags. A new system like this would not only educate consumers, but would also push product manufacturers to implement new innovative strategies for product packaging. I promise you, if this was implemented, by next year, we would have a recyclable chip bag. The second solution I want to share with you today is that we need to start in our grocery stores. A majority of our recycling that is collected is actually from the grocery store. And consumers are still faced with thousands of different products with thousands of different labels and confusion in what is recyclable and what is not. And solution number 3, we need to streamline the types of plastic that enter our countries. Plastics number 1, 2, and 5 are famously known for their recyclability and are accepted by a majority of the globe's recycling facilities. Only when we make these changes can we create a true circular economy. An economy where our consumers can purchase products, easily understand if they're recyclable or not, and have those recycled products circulate back into new products for us to purchase. This is the future that we need for all of us. And I'm excited to work with each and every one of you to make that a reality. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a leading voice who speaks out for using nuclear technology to solve our most pressing global challenges. Ben studies clean energy issues with a focus on nuclear technology. We're delighted to have Bright New World board member Ben Hurd with us today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ben Hurd, and I founded an environmental NGO here in Australia by the name of Bright New World. And the ethic behind the NGO is really in the name. We founded this organisation to present a really optimistic point of view about what our future can be, while being realistic about the challenges that we've got in front of us, particularly in relation to having a rich, sustainable natural environment, and one that can combine with a world of human prosperity. And that's something that I believe is possible and is within reach. Not easy, but possible and within reach. And the first thing we need to achieve that is some vision. I would like to talk to you a little bit about what the vision and the ethics behind that organisation is, and some of the journey that I've had in thinking about these issues. And I hope that they'll help you and everyone at this conference in thinking about what are some of the great challenges that we are facing. I am aware, as you will be, that the world's population is continuing to grow. You might not be aware, as I wasn't, that the rate of that growth peaked before I was born. Back around 1970 was the fastest rate of population growth that we've ever seen, and it has been in decline ever since then. So while the population is still growing, that growth curve is flattening. And we're now really pretty confident that we're going to achieve some sort of steady state in population, perhaps in the latter half of this century, and then it might even start declining all of its own accord because of the demographic changes that are taking place. So that took a challenge that felt unwieldy, and I put that boundary around it. And so now when I'm thinking about the challenges we're facing in the world, I talk about it as it's a 10 billion human challenge. And we need solutions that are inclusive and welcoming and loving for 10 billion humans. Because that's what we're going to have. And every one of us is as deserving as every other one of us. So it was empowering to be able to put a boundary around that. The next really exciting piece of news is that the reason behind that change were, in their own right, really good. almost immediately upon being able to move from poverty and subsistence and into a better, healthier, safer lifestyle, people are having fewer and fewer children. People have children later, people have fewer children. The children survive. And there is an opportunity, particularly for women, to participate in the world in a way that the previous life they were living didn't allow them. And very, very swiftly, we find right around the world, a lot of people are interested in having maybe 2 children. So it might not surprise you to know that in Australia, the rate of births here per woman is now less than 2. It might surprise you to know that that's just about the case in Bangladesh as well. So there are a whole host of countries that very quickly in this development pathway, we see that demographic change. So we get the result that we think we're looking for, which is this boundary around population, by helping people and by providing for them and providing for the world around them. So I'm a very pro-technology person, and I'm a very pro-science person, but they are only the tools. The ethics and the motivations and the drive behind the deployment, that has to be the vision. Now, that is one reason why I am such a big supporter of nuclear power technologies. And I wasn't always. That change for me happened about 10 years ago, after a lot of introspection and research. Nuclear technologies help us do something that we desperately need to do, which is shrink our impact. The amazing energy density that we get from nuclear technologies and nuclear fuel means one of the most crucial ingredients that we need to drive that prosperity that can lead to all of those good outcomes, energy, can come from so little. So to put it into some context, a pellet of nuclear fuel, around about that big, provides about as much energy as an entire metric ton of good quality coal. And it does it without releasing any gases at all. There is no combustion, there's no oxygen in the process, so there's no carbon dioxide. There's no air pollution. Everything remains right there in that pellet. And that pellet can be recycled, and we can get about another 20 times more energy out of that. So suddenly, one of the most crucial things that we need to support our safe and prosperous lifestyles that has these negative consequences attached to them, we can take so many of those negative consequences out of the picture, like particularly climate change. Decarbonised energy systems are absolutely possible, and in many parts of the world, for the first part of that challenge, electricity grids, they're already operating right now. When we've used nuclear technologies and renewable technologies together, there are decarbonised grids around the world already. We have a template. So that part is a challenge, but it's not a riddle. We know what to do. We can get on with doing it. So I see our goal and the great vision that we've got for the future is that we've got the templates for some really effective ways of doing this, and they must be accelerated and expanded worldwide. And what I see is very, very exciting is that some of the newest economies in the world that are growing now, they are going to begin with such vastly better technologies and opportunities than some of the older economies began with. So we've got ways of doing this now. Now, it's going to be very, very hard. And part of the challenge of getting onto this, I guess, optimistic footing is actually a little bit of what I would say is grieving and accepting some sense of loss. So for that reason, the fairly small NGO that I operate with limited resources, for now, we choose to focus really clearly on the nuclear technologies. As we understand it, seeing that root challenge solved of making that clean energy plentiful and cheap and available to everyone, with all of the benefits that that technology brings for the environment, is a foundation stone for addressing all of the subsequent layers of the challenge. And so that's our real chosen area of focus. I hope I've encapsulated for you some of the philosophy that I bring to my work, which I think is mostly summed up these days by a term I'm really fond of, which is eco-modernism. And that's someone who has a strong appreciation for the benefits of modernity in the modern world, a strong love for nature and a need and a desire to see us build a better, greener world around us. And I think one of the most important ways of making that happen is to make it work for people. We can't leave people behind. We need to make sure that the needs of people are being addressed so that they can come on a positive journey. So we've got to find all of those opportunities, and there are so many, where we get these outcomes all together and all at once. And that is the foundation of my work. I wish you all a wonderful conference and all of the very best. Thank you for inviting me, and have a wonderful conference.
We will now talk with the director of the International Business Department of the Rosatom Corporation, Boris Arseev, about what Rosatom is doing to foster green environmental thinking in the younger generation and how environmental care is integrated into the corporation's business practices.
Hello everyone, my name is Boris Arseev. I am Deputy Director for Global Business Development in Russian Nuclear State Corporation Rosatom. Rosatom is a state corporation, the only one in Russia, working in the field of nuclear energy. The corporation covers the entire nuclear manufacturing cycle, from uranium mining and nuclear power plant construction to personnel training and maintenance of nuclear power plant. What do you think this is? It is 400 kilos of coal. It is also 640 kilos of firewood, or 350 kilos of oil. What I hold in my hand is the fuel for nuclear power plant, 4 grams of enriched uranium, packed with 2,800 kilo-hours of electricity. Don't worry, that's a dummy. Nuclear energy is a low-carbon energy generation source, preventing carbon emissions and making a significant contribution to environmental protection. Just in 2019, the Russian-designed nuclear power plants allowed to avoid 210 million tons of CO2 emissions all over the world. This amount is equal to about 33 million hectares of forests that will absorb the same amount of CO2 in a year. We in Rosatom define safety and the responsible attitude to environment as our main corporate value. This year we celebrate 75 years of nuclear industry, and I can state with confidence that Russian nuclear industry has been sharing value of responsible consumption of natural resources for 75 years. Responsible consumption is not just about recycling old clothes, used cans, and many other things that we throw away daily. Society should care about the type of energy that charges laptops and whether it is green. For 100 years, the humankind has been using natural resources extensively and continues down the same path today. Such a responsible attitude caused the most crucial environmental problem in history, the global climate change. That is why Rosatom is developing various innovative low-carbon energy sources that are eco-friendly, safe, and economically efficient. During the last 14 years, we have connected to the grid 15 nuclear power plant units in Russia and abroad. This year, through pandemic, Rosatom has connected the grid to additional units. Besides, it can surprise you, Rosatom is also developing the renewables. Rosatom is constructing wind power plants of 1,000 megawatt of total capacity in Russia. And this year, the largest wind farm in Russia, constructed by Rosatom, began supplying first 150 megawatt electric power. As a business, we do not just seek to increase profits, but we strive to be a responsible consumer of natural resources to preserve our planet for the next generations. We as a business should develop responsible consumption philosophy, not only for market, but firstly inside the company. The nuclear industry is technologically complex and it is focused on safety and responsible attitude to the environment. This approach is must for nuclear industry employees. Russian nuclear industry employs over 250,000 people. We try to form responsible manufacturing approach at the level of corporate culture and values. Employees follow this philosophy not only at work as a part of manufacturing processes, but also in everyday life. When responsible thinking extends to the employees' families and even cities, it is possible to promote new values among the younger generation. We believe that lean approach to the environment should be formed from early childhood, then responsible thinking becomes an integral part of the lifestyle. When we are talking about businesses, we should remember that not only project portfolio has to be green-oriented. It is necessary to develop internal changes that allow achieving responsible consumption. Rosatom, as a responsible company, has created a production system to improve production efficiency and use of resources. We are implementing corporate programs to develop a responsible attitude to resources. Let me give you an example. In 2019, industry employees submitted more than 50,000 proposals on how to improve the technological processes, and more than 4,000 projects were implemented. Cooperation between the company and its employees gives a unique synergy, allowing to form responsible thinking and develop the generation of citizens who are focused on green approach. The importance of this principle, as well as human centricity, have been weaved into the Rosatom 2030 strategy. The future is human-centric, and it's important to create real opportunities for all people, regardless of gender, age, and geography. This calls for cooperative efforts. We aim to create corporate environment where every employee and partner can realize their potential. This is yet another contribution to the development of responsible thinking and development of new lifestyle. Please wait a second. Thank you for your attention. Join us. Together we save the planet.